Over the following days, Varanthi showed Marcus the truth about the Velithari ascendancy that no outsider had ever been allowed to see. She took him to the great museums where millions of artworks hung on endless walls, and she showed him how every piece created in the last 600 years looked almost identical to every other piece. She took him to the academies where the greatest minds of her civilization gathered to study the universe. And she showed him laboratories where no new experiment had been conducted in centuries, because there was nothing left that anyone wanted to learn. She took him to the nurseries where Velithari children were raised, and Marcus saw rows of empty rooms that had once held thousands of young ones, but now held only a handful. We have forgotten how to want things, Varanthi explained as they walked through a garden of flowers that never wilted and never changed. When you can live forever and have everything you need, desire becomes meaningless. And without desire, there is no motivation to create or discover or grow. Marcus watched a Velithari gardener tend to the perfect flowers with mechanical precision, performing the same movements he had probably performed every day for hundreds of years. On Earth we have a saying, Marcus said, that necessity is the mother of invention. And we have eliminated all necessity, Varanthi replied, which means we have eliminated invention itself. She led him to a balcony overlooking a vast city that stretched to the horizon, towers of crystal and light rising into a purple sky. Look at this city, she said. It is considered one of the great achievements of our civilization, a masterpiece of engineering and design. Marcus looked and saw that it was indeed beautiful. Perhaps the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. When was it built? He asked. 2,000 years ago, Varanthi answered, and it has not changed since. Not one building added, not one structure modified, because change implies imperfection. And we convinced ourselves that we had achieved perfection. She turned to face him, and her expression was heavy with sorrow. Your species builds cities and tears them down and builds new ones in their place, she said. You create art and then create art that mocks that art, and then create art that celebrates the mockery. You fight wars over ideas and then change your minds about which ideas were worth fighting for. That sounds like criticism, Marcus said. It sounds like life, Varanthi replied. Messy and chaotic and constantly evolving. And we traded all of that for immortality without understanding what we were giving up. A servant appeared and whispered something to Varanthi in a language Marcus did not understand. Her expression hardened. My uncle has requested an audience with you, she said. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Is that dangerous? He asked. Everything about High Lord Zethran is dangerous, Varanthi said. But refusing his request would be more dangerous still, and it would make him suspicious about why I have been spending time with you. She took his arm and began walking toward the interior of the building. Remember that he does not know about the prophecy chamber or about your name carved in the stone, she said quietly. As far as he knows, you are simply a minor human diplomat of no importance. I thought I was a minor human diplomat of no importance. Marcus said. Varanthi almost smiled. You are learning to think like a human, she said. That is good, because you will meet every advantage when you face my uncle. The audience chamber of High Lord Zethran was nothing like Varanthi's warm and cluttered study. It was a vast cold space of black marble and harsh white light, designed to make anyone who entered feel small and insignificant. And himself sat on an elevated platform at the far end, and even seated he radiated power and menace in a way that made Marcus want to turn and run. He was old, older than any Velithari Marcus had met, and his luminescent skin had faded to a pale gray that made him look like a statue come to life. His galaxy eyes were different from Varanthi's too, darker and more turbulent, filled with storms rather than stars. So this is the human, Zethran said, and his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. Marcus bowed in the manner Varanthi had taught him. High Lord Zethran, he said, I am honored. By your invitation. Invitation suggests you had a choice. Zethran replied, You did not. He rose from his seat and descended the steps toward Marcus with slow, deliberate movements. I have studied your species for many centuries. He continued, I have watched you crawl out of caves and build primitive shelters and kill each other over scraps of land. He stopped directly in front of Marcus, towering over him by more than 2 feet, and I have watched you spread across your world like a disease, he said, consuming everything in your path, destroying ecosystems that took millions of years to develop, driving countless species to extinction. Marcus forced himself to meet Zethran's dark, swirling eyes. We have made mistakes, he admitted, but we have also created art and music and science. We have sent probes to the edge of our solar system and cured diseases that once killed millions. Zethran's expression did not change. You speak of achievements, he said, but I speak of patterns. And the pattern of humanity is chaos and destruction wherever you go. He began to circle Marcus, slowly like a predator examining prey. Your species reproduces at an alarming rate, he continued. You have doubled your population multiple times in just a few centuries. How long before you outgrow your planet and begin looking to the stars? We already look to the stars, Marcus said, but not as conquerors. We look as explorers, as seekers of knowledge. Zethran laughed, and it was a cold, terrible sound. Every conqueror in history has claimed to be an explorer, he said. Every empire has justified its expansion as the spread of civilization. Your species is not different. You are simply younger. He stopped his circling and stood before Marcus once more. I have proposed to the Council of Eternals that we end the human threat before it begins, he said. A surgical strike on your home world that would remove your species from the galaxy entirely. Marcus felt rage building inside him, but forced himself to remain calm. You would commit genocide against billions of innocent beings because of what we might do someday, he asked. I would prevent a greater tragedy. Zethran replied, the destruction of an empire that has existed for 100,000 years. The loss of knowledge and culture and history that your short-lived minds cannot even comprehend. He leaned closer and his dark eyes bored into Marcus's. Your species is a fire, he said. Beautiful perhaps, but ultimately destructive. And the only way to prevent a fire from consuming everything is to extinguish it while it is still small. Marcus held his ground. Or you could learn from the fire, he said quietly. You could remember what warmth feels like. For a moment something flickered in Zethran's eyes. Something that might have been doubt or might have been fury. Then it was gone. Return to your quarters, human, he said, turning away. Enjoy the time you have left, because the council will vote soon, and when they do, your species will be nothing. But a footnote in the history of the ascendancy. Marcus bowed again and left the chamber. His hands shaking with a combination of fear and anger. Varanti was waiting for him outside. What did he say? She asked. Marcus looked back at the closed doors of the audience chamber. He said he is going to burn my world, he replied, and I think I just made things worse. Varanti took his arm and led him away. Then we must move faster than I planned, she said. There may still be a way to stop him, but it will require you to do something no human has ever done before. What? Marcus, Etched Varanti's galaxy eyes met his with fierce determination. You must address the Council of Eternals, she said. And you must convince immortals who have lived for 3,000 years that a creature who will die in less than a century has something worth hearing. Lieutenant Marcus Cole had been lost for nearly 20 minutes inside the alien ship, and he was starting to feel like a complete fool. The corridors of the Velothari diplomatic cruiser all looked the same to him, with their smooth crystalline walls that glowed with soft blue light and their strange symbols that he could not read, despite being a trained Xenolinguist was the first human ever. allowed aboard an ascendancy vessel. And here he was wandering around like a child lost in a shopping mall. The Velethari had watched humanity for 10,000 years and had always considered them too primitive and too chaotic for contact. But something had changed recently, and now they wanted to talk. And Marcus had been chosen as a cultural liaison because he was young and unimportant, and therefore not threatening to the proud alien empire. He stopped at another intersection where three always met and let out a long breath. Every door looked identical, and the ship seemed to stretch on forever in ways that made no sense to his human brain. He had left his quarters to find the dining hall 2 hours ago, and somehow he had ended up in a section of the ship he had never seen before. The walls here were darker, and the air felt heavier, and there was a strange humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Marcus approached a door that looked just like all the others and pressed his palm against the panel beside it, hoping it would lead somewhere familiar. The panel flashed green, which surprised him because most doors on the ship did not respond to human touch at all. He stepped through the opening and immediately knew he had made a terrible mistake. The chamber beyond was enormous, far larger than any room he had seen on the ship, with ceilings that rose so high they disappeared into darkness above. Strange objects filled the space, things that looked like ancient relics and star maps and sculptures made of materials he could not identify. The walls were covered with writing in a script that was old and beautiful and completely foreign to him, but none of that mattered, because his eyes had found the center of the room, where a pillar of black stone stood beneath a single beam of soft golden light, and carved into that pillar, in letters that he could read perfectly, was a name Marcus Cole, his own name written in English on an alien artifact that looked older than human civilization itself. He stood frozen in place as his mind tried to make sense of what he was seeing. This was impossible. Velethari had only made contact with humanity 3 years ago. There was no way his name could be carved into something that looked thousands of years old. He walked toward the pillar slowly, his legs feeling weak and his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The letters were definitely English, and they definitely spelled his name, and when he reached out to touch them, he could feel that they had been carved deep into the stone with incredible precision. "You were not supposed to find this." The voice came from behind him, and Marcus spun around so fast he nearly fell over. Princess Varanthi stood in the archway he had entered through, her tall, elegant form outlined by the blue light of the corridor behind her. She was 7 feet tall, like all Velethari, with skin that seemed to glow faintly from within, and eyes that looked like they contained entire galaxies, swirling with stars and nebulae and colors that had no names in any human language. Marcus had seen her only once before, at the formal welcome ceremony when he first boarded the ship, and she had not spoken a single word to him or even looked in his direction. But now she was staring at him with an expression he could not read, and her galaxy eyes were fixed on his face with an intensity that made him want to run. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quickly, holding up his hands. "I got lost, and the door opened, and I did not mean to intrude on your private space." "Your Highness." He knew the punishment for entering royal chambers without permission. The Velethari had executed members of their own species for lesser offenses, but Varanthi did not call for guards. She did not raise her voice or reach for any weapon. Instead, she walked past him toward the pillar and stood there for a long moment, looking at his name carved into the ancient stone. "Do you know how old this artifact is?" she asked, her voice soft and musical in the way all Velethari voices were. "No, Your Highness. It was created 8,000 of your years ago," she said. "Before your species had built its first cities, before you had learned to write, before you had even spread beyond your original continent." Marcus felt dizzy. "That is not possible," he said. "And yet here it is," Varanthi replied. Turning to face him, Your name, carved by the greatest seers our civilization has ever produced. 8 millennia before you were born. She walked toward him slowly, and Marcus had to fight the urge to back away. The seers experienced a vision, she continued. The only true prophecy in our recorded history. And they called it the telling of the Wanderers. And it spoke of a species that would rise from a small blue world. Beings who burned bright and died fast. Creatures who carried chaos in their very blood. Humans, Marcus whispered. Yes, Virenti said. And the prophecy named one human specifically. One who would stand at the crossroads of 2 possible futures. One who would determine whether my people survived or faded into extinction. She stopped directly in front of him. So close, he could see the stars swirling in her eyes. My family has protected this chamber for 8,000 years. Lieutenant Cole. Waiting for the day when the named one would arrive, Marcus shook his head slowly. You have the wrong person, he said. I am nobody important. I am just a junior linguist. I was chosen for this mission because I am unremarkable and expendable. Something flickered in Virenti's expression. Something that might have been amusement or might have been pity. That is precisely what makes your species so terrifying to us, she said. Any one of you could be someone. You never know your own significance until the universe chooses to reveal it. She reached out and touched the pillar, her glowing fingers tracing the letters of his name. You were always going to find this room. Marcus Cole, she said. The door opened for you because it was designed to open for you. 8,000 years ago, by beings who saw your face in their dreams before your ancestors had learned to make fire. Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to explain that this was all a mistake. That prophecies were not real. That he was just a scared young man who had gotten lost on an alien ship, but the evidence was right in front of him. Carved in stone that was older than human memory, his name, waiting for him across 8,000 years of time. What happens now? He asked, and Virenti's galaxy eyes met his, and in them he saw something he had not expected to see in an immortal alien prince's fear. Now, she said quietly, I tell you the truth about why my people are dying, and why you might be the only one who can save us. She turned and walked toward a door on the far side of the chamber. Follow me, Lieutenant, she said without looking back. And speak of this to no one. Marcus looked at his name one more time. Carved into alien stone by ancient hands that had somehow known he would come. Then he followed the princess into the darkness beyond. Princess Virenti led Marcus through a series of hidden passages that seemed to exist between the walls of the ship itself. They walked in silence for several minutes until they reached a small private chamber, filled with books and screens and strange devices that hummed with quiet energy. She gestured for him to sit in a chair that adjusted itself to his smaller human body. And then she sat across from him and studied his face as if searching for something. What I am about to tell you is known only to the royal family, she began. If the wrong people learned that I shared this with a human, we would both be executed. Marcus swallowed hard but did not speak. The telling of the Wanderers was not simply a prediction about your species, Virenti continued. It was a warning about mine. She waved her hand and a holographic display appeared between them, showing images of the Velathari throughout their history. Marcus saw their ancient cities rising from alien worlds, their ships spreading across the stars, their civilization growing more and more advanced with each passing century. My people achieved biological immortality 4,000 years ago, Virenti said. We eliminated disease and aging and even most forms of accidental death. And we believed we had conquered the universe itself. The images shifted to show the Velathari of the present day. And Marcus noticed something he had not seen before. They all looked the same, not just similar in the way that members of a species often resembled each other, but truly identical, as if they had been copied from a single template over and over again. We optimized ourselves, Varanthi explained. We removed everything we considered flaws. Everything chaotic, everything unpredictable. And in doing so, we became perfect. She paused, and her galaxy eyes grew dim. And perfection, it turns out, is another word for death. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. What do you mean? He asked. Our birth rates have fallen to almost nothing, she said. In the last 500 years, fewer children have been born than in any single decade of our ancient past. And those children who are born have no spark, no creativity, no desire to explore or create or change. She waved her hand again, and the display showed graphs and numbers that Marcus could not fully understand, but that clearly showed a civilization in decline. Our art has become repetitive. Because we have nothing new to say, Varanthi continued. Our science is stalled because we have stopped asking questions. Our people live for 3,000 years and spend most of that time doing exactly what they did the day before. You are dying, Marcus said quietly. We are already dead, Varanthi replied. We simply have not stopped moving yet. She stood and walked to a window that showed the stars streaming past as the ship traveled through space. The seers saw this coming 8,000 years ago, she said. They saw that our pursuit of perfection would eventually destroy us. And they saw only one possible salvation. Humans, Marcus said. Your species lives, 80 years on average? Varanthi asked, turning to face him. Perhaps 100 if you are fortunate? Something like that, Marcus agreed. We live 3,000, she said. And yet the seers saw your kind spreading across the galaxy, building and destroying and rebuilding, changing and growing and evolving, while we sat frozen in our perfect immortality and slowly turned to stone. She walked back to her chair and sat down heavily, looking more tired than any immortal being should be able to look. The prophecy said that a human named Marcus Cole would stand at the crossroads of two futures, she explained. In one future, my people fade away within 10 generations, forgotten by a universe that moves on without us. And in the other future, we find a way to change, to grow, to remember what it means to truly live. And I'm supposed to somehow make the second future happen? Marcus asked, unable to keep the disbelief from his voice. The seers did not explain how, Varanthi admitted. They only saw that you would be present at the moment of decision, that your actions would determine which path my people followed. Marcus ran his hands through his hair and tried to process everything he was hearing. Your Highness, I do not understand why me, he said. There are 7 billion humans on Earth, many of them far more capable and intelligent than I am. Why would ancient prophecy point to a junior linguist who cannot even find his way around a ship? Varanthi smiled, and it was the first real emotion he had seen on her face. That question is precisely why my people fear yours, she said. You do not understand your own potential. You never know which of you will change history until the moment arrives. And that unpredictability terrifies beings who have spent millennia trying to control every variable. She leaned forward, and her eyes locked onto his. You ask why you, she said. But in 8,000 years of waiting, we have learned that humans never fit the expectations placed upon them. The seers could see the future, but even they could not explain why it would be you. They only knew that it would. A chime sounded somewhere in the room, and Viranthi's expression immediately changed to one of caution. There is something else you must know, she said quickly. Something that makes this situation far more dangerous than a simple prophecy. What? Marcus asked. Not everyone in the Ascendancy believes the telling of the Wanderers is a promise of salvation, she said. My uncle, High Lord Zethrin, has spent centuries arguing that it is actually a warning. A warning about what? About you, Varanthi said. About humanity. About the chaos your species represents. He believes the prophecy means that humans will destroy us if we allow them to spread. And he has gathered many followers who share his interpretation. Marcus felt cold suddenly. What does he want to do about it? He asked, though he already suspected the answer. He is building a fleet, Viranti said. The largest military force assembled in 1,000 years. And he intends to use it to destroy Earth before the prophecy can come to pass. Before humans can spread beyond their home world. Before your chaos can infect the galaxy. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He wants to kill everyone on Earth? He whispered, 7 billion lives to protect an empire that is already dying, Viranti said bitterly. My uncle would rather commit genocide than admit that we might need to change. She stood again and walked to the door. I have been fighting him in the council for decades, she said. But his faction grows stronger every year. And I am running out of arguments that will sway the Eternals. The Eternals? Marcus asked. The ruling council of our civilization, she explained. 12 immortals who have guided the ascendancy for millennia, and who will soon vote on whether to approve my uncle's plan. She looked back at him, and her galaxy eyes were filled with something that might have been hope or might have been desperation. The prophecy says you will stand at the crossroads. Marcus Cole, she said. I do not know what that means or what you are supposed to do. But I know that I cannot stop my uncle alone. She opened the door. Will you help me save your world? She asked Marcus thought about Earth, about his family, about the billions of people who had no idea an alien armada was debating there. Extinction. He stood up from his chair. Tell me what you need me to do, he said. The weeping of the eternal female spread through the council chamber like ripples across water one by one. The ancient beings who had not felt strong emotion in centuries found themselves responding to something in Marcus's simple imperfect words. Even those who did not weep sat in stunned silence. Their galaxy eyes wide with an expression Marcus could only describe as recognition. It was as if they had forgotten something important long ago and were only now remembering it. Cithran stood, rigid with shock and anger. This is manipulation, he declared. The human has used some trick to affect your minds. His primitive scribbling cannot compare to the mathematical perfection of true art. The eldest Eternal turned to him, and her ancient face was wet with tears she had not shed in 1,000 years. Your symphony was flawless. High Lord, she said, and I have heard 100 symphonies exactly like it. From you and from others, perfect compositions that follow every rule and break no boundaries. She turned to look at Marcus, but this human's poem was new. She continued, not new in technique or structure, but new in what it made me feel. He reminded me of something I had forgotten since the day I achieved immortality. What? Zithron demanded. That time matters, the Eternal replied. That moments are precious because they end. That the beauty of existence comes not from its permanence, but from its fragility. Another Eternal spoke. A male who had been silent throughout all the proceedings. I built my first sculpture 8,000 years ago, he said. And I have built 10,000 since, each one technically superior to the last. Each one meaning less than the one before. He looked at Marcus with something like wonder in his ancient eyes. I had forgotten what it felt like to create something that came from need rather than habit, he said. To make art because I had something to say rather than because I had time to fill. Zethran's face twisted with fury. You would let a dozen lines of crude human sentiment outweigh the survival of our civilization? He shouted. You would abandon millennia of progress because a dying creature made you cry. He did not make us cry, the eldest Eternal said quietly. He reminded us why we stopped. She rose from her position and floated to the center of the chamber where Marcus stood. High Lord Zithran has argued that humanity is a threat because of their chaos, she announced to the council. But I now see that their chaos is not a flaw, it is a gift. The gift of beings who must make every moment count because they have so few moments. She turned to address all the Eternals. We achieved perfection, and it has been killing us. She said, our children are born without passion. Our artists create without meaning. Our scientists discover without wonder. And we told ourselves this was the natural price of immortality. Her gaze moved to Zethrin. But these humans burn with life despite knowing they will die, she continued. Perhaps because they know they will die, and their fire has reminded me of something I had given up as impossible. What? Zethrin asked through clenched teeth. Hope, the Eternal said. Hope that we might learn to feel again. Hope that our civilization might find a reason to grow rather than simply endure. The vote that followed was not close. 9 of the 12 Eternals voted against Zethrin's proposal to destroy Earth. More importantly, they voted to establish true diplomatic relations with humanity, not as a superior species condescending to lesser beings, but as equals who might have something to learn from each other. Zethrin stormed out of the chamber without speaking, and Marcus knew that he had made a powerful enemy. But in that moment, he did not care. Varanthi found him later in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars with an expression of exhausted disbelief. You did it, she said. Sitting down beside him, I wrote a bad poem, Marcus replied. I did not expect it to save the world. Varanthi laughed, and it was a warm, genuine sound that seemed strange coming from an immortal, alien princess. The seers were wrong about one thing, she said. What do you mean? They saw you standing at the crossroads, she explained. They saw that you would determine the fate of my people, and everyone assumed that meant some great battle or revolutionary discovery. She turned to look at him with her galaxy eyes, but instead it was 12 lines, she said. 12 imperfect lines that reminded us why living is worth the trouble of dying. Marcus shook his head slowly. I still do not understand why it had to be me, he said. Any human could have written something similar. Probably something better. Perhaps, Varanthi agreed. But any human did not. You did. And that is the point, is it not? She reached out and took his hand, her luminescent fingers intertwining with his ordinary human ones. Your species does not wait for destiny to choose them, she said. You choose yourselves, every one of you carrying the potential to change everything. And you never know which one of you will be the one who does. In the weeks that followed, something unprecedented began to happen throughout the Velethari Ascendancy artists, who had been creating the same works for centuries, began experimenting with new forms and styles, seeking out human collaborators who could teach them about imperfection and raw emotion. Scientists who had stopped asking questions started wondering again, designing experiments that had no guaranteed outcomes and finding joy in uncertainty. And for the first time in 500 years, Velethari couples began choosing to have children, not out of duty or tradition, but out of a desire to create something new and unpredictable. Marcus became something of a celebrity, the human whose bad poem had shaken an empire. But he never felt comfortable with the attention. He was still the same junior linguist who got lost on alien ships and stumbled over his words when he was nervous. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps the greatest gift humanity could offer the universe was not their achievements, but their capacity to surprise themselves. On his last day aboard the diplomatic cruiser before returning to Earth, Marcus visited the prophecy chamber one more time. His name still glowed on the ancient black pillar, carved by beings who had seen his face in visions 8,000 years before he was born. Varanthi stood beside him. Will you come back? She asked. If you will have me, he said. She smiled, and in her galaxy eyes he saw stars being born. The seers only showed us the moment of decision, she said. They did not show us what comes after. So we will have to discover that together. Marcus looked at his name one last time. He thought about all the humans on Earth who had no idea what had almost happened to them. All the ordinary people living ordinary lives with no knowledge that an alien armada had. Debated their extinction. He thought about how any one of them could have stood where he was standing, and he understood. Finally, what the prophecy really meant. It was never about him being special. It was about humanity being unpredictable. Any human could change everything at any moment, and that beautiful, terrifying truth was exactly what a dying empire needed to remember. He took Virenthi's hand and they walked together out of the chamber, leaving the ancient stone and its carved name behind above them. The stars continued their eternal dance, and somewhere among those stars, two civilizations were learning that the brightest fire was the one that knew it would someday go out. Marcus spent 3 sleepless nights preparing for his appearance before the Council of Eternals. Virenthi had managed to secure him speaking time by claiming it was part of the cultural exchange program, a chance for the Council to hear directly from a human representative before making any decisions about Earth. It was a thin excuse, and everyone knew it. But ancient protocols required the Council to hear from affected parties before voting on matters of extinction. And so Marcus would have his chance to speak. The problem was that he had no idea what to say. He had tried writing speeches about human achievements, about their art and science and capacity for growth. But every draft felt hollow and weak compared to the weight of what Zethran was proposing. How could he convince beings who had lived for thousands of years that humanity deserved to exist? On the 4th morning, Virenthi came to his quarters and found him surrounded by crumpled papers and empty cups of the bitter stimulant drink the Velathari provided. "Instead of coffee, you look terrible," she said. "I have been trying to find the right words to save 7 billion lives," he replied. "Forgive me if I have not had time for grooming." Virenthi sat down across from him and studied his face. "You are approaching this wrong," she said. Marcus laughed bitterly. "Please, tell me the right way to approach convincing an alien council not to destroy my entire species," he said. "You cannot win with words alone," Virenthi explained. "My people have heard every argument 1,000,000 times. They have debated philosophy and morality and the nature of existence for longer than your species has had language. Then how am I supposed to change their minds?" Virenthi was quiet for a moment, and then her galaxy eyes lit up with something Marcus had not seen before. "My uncle won his followers not through speeches, but through demonstrations," she said. "He showed them images of human wars and human cruelty and human environmental destruction. And he made them feel that humanity was a threat. So I showed them good images instead?" Marcus asked doubtfully. "No," Virenthi said. "You should show them something they cannot argue with. Something that demonstrates rather than explains." She stood and began pacing the room. "My people respect creation above all else," she continued. "It is the one value that has survived our stagnation. The belief that the ability to create something new is the highest expression of sentient life." An idea began to form in Marcus's tired mind. What if I challenged Zethran to a contest? He said slowly. Virenthi stopped pacing. "What kind of contest?" "A contest of creation," Marcus said, feeling the idea take shape as he spoke. "Both of us would be given the same amount of time to create something new, anything we wanted. And the council would judge which creation demonstrated greater worth." Virenthi stared at him. "You would challenge a being who has 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge and skill to a contest of artistic creation?" "Yes," Marcus said. "He would destroy you," Virenthi said. "His technical mastery alone is beyond anything a human could match." Marcus smiled. And it was the first time he had smiled in days. "That is exactly what I am counting on," he said. The council chamber was a sphere of pure white light that seemed to have no walls or floor or ceiling. The 12 Eternals floated in a circle around the center of the chamber. their ancient forms barely visible within the brightness. And Marcus stood before them feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. Lord Zethran floated opposite him, his dark storm-filled eyes fixed on Marcus with contempt. "The human has requested the right to speak," the eldest Eternal announced. "We will hear him." Marcus bowed deeply. "Honored Eternals," he began, "I come before you not to argue against the wisdom of your years, or to claim that humanity is without flaw." A murmur ran through the council. "Instead," Marcus continued, "I propose a demonstration, a test that will show you what humanity truly is. Not through my words, but through our most fundamental nature." "What test?" asked one of the Eternals. "A contest of creation," Marcus said. "I challenge High Lord Zethran to compete with me. Both of us given one-day cycle to create something new. Art or music or invention, anything that comes from our own minds and hands. And the council will judge which creation demonstrates greater worth to the galaxy." Silence fell over the chamber. Zethran laughed, the sound echoing through the white space. "You challenge me?" he said. "A creature who will die in the blink of an eye challenges an immortal who has mastered every form of art your species has ever attempted." "I do," Marcus said simply. "This is absurd," Zethran declared to the council. "The human seeks to delay his world's judgment through foolish games." But the eldest Eternal raised her hand. "The challenge is valid according to ancient law," she said. "And it has been many centuries since we witnessed a contest of creation. I would see what both parties produce." The other Eternals murmured agreement. And Marcus saw something pass across Zethran's face, a flicker of uncertainty that was quickly masked. "Very well," Zethran said. "I accept the challenge. And when I have demonstrated beyond all doubt the superiority of Velethari creation, the council will see that humanity has nothing to offer the universe but chaos." They were given separate chambers and identical time limits and told to create whatever they wish. Zethran immediately began composing a symphony, his fingers dancing over instruments that produced sounds Marcus had never heard before, building layers of mathematical perfection that wove together into something technically flawless. Marcus sat alone in his chamber and stared at the blank page before him. He thought about all the speeches he had written and discarded. He thought about human achievements and human failures. He thought about his grandmother's kitchen where she had taught him to cook, about the first time he had looked through a telescope and seen the rings of Saturn, about every stumble and every success and every ordinary moment that had made up his ordinary life. And he realized that he could not compete with Zethran on technical skill. He could not match 3,000 years of practice and knowledge, but he could offer something that Zethran had forgotten how to make. He picked up the writing tool and began to put words on the page, not worrying about meter or structure or whether the phrases were elegant enough, just letting the feelings pour out of him onto the paper. He wrote about being small in a vast universe. He wrote about knowing that every moment was precious because there would only ever be so many moments. He wrote about the desperate, foolish, beautiful hope of creatures who built cathedrals, knowing they would never see them finished. He wrote about love and loss and the strange miracle of consciousness that allowed atoms to look up at the stars and wonder when the time ended. He had 12 lines, 12 rough, imperfect lines that broke most of the rules of poetry. The council gathered again, and Zethran presented his symphony. First, it was magnificent waves of sound washed over the chamber, perfectly balanced harmonies that demonstrated complete mastery of mathematical and artistic principles. And when it ended, the Eternals applauded with genuine appreciation. 3,000 years of study and practice have produced this work, Zethran announced proudly. Let the humans show what 29 years can offer. Marcus stepped forward and read his 12 lines aloud. His voice shook. slightly, and he stumbled over one phrase in the words. Sounded small and fragile after the grandeur of Zethran's symphony. When he finished, there was silence, and then one of the Eternals, a female who had not spoken during any of the proceedings, made a sound that Marcus did not recognize at first. It took him a moment to realize she was weeping. She was weeping, and she had not wept in 600 years.